Schmid, and I was born and raised in Northern California, but I now live in Central Illinois, and I make jewelry for a living. I was not always a jeweler. I got my sculpture and installation art degree from UC Santa Barbara in California. And I was doing like very large scale welding and, like gallery space stuff that was large scale. So when I graduated, I was living in this tiny little apartment with a bunch of girls on the coast, and I couldn't make the sculpture that I wanted to make because I had no room. And it was my mom who actually suggested, hey, why don't you just make some jewelry? And initially I wrote it off. I was like, I'm not a jeweler. I wouldn't like that at all. But I have to eat my words because she was totally right. I ended up loving it. And I've been doing that for years now, almost 20 years. I think in many ways it is like sculpture. It's just on a micro level. The inspiration that I get is usually from materials. I really enjoy pushing the boundaries and not using materials that you might normally think of as jewelry. So the fun of it for me is kind of going to salvage yards and aerospace salvage yards and electrical components and finding things that have nothing to do with jewelry and then taking them back to my studio and then saying, okay, now what can I do? Can I even make this into jewelry? And I think I'm a natural problem solver. And so that process of trying to make it work is what inspires me. The jewelry that I was doing always kind of used that salvage scrap material, but then about 7 years ago, I really got into gardening, and it gave me a joy and a sense of pride to grow little plants and watch them evolve. And I just got obsessed almost, and I was making little pots for the plants, and I made my own hanging planter that hung in the window. And when I took a step back and I thought, oh my gosh, that actually looks like a necklace. And that was that kind of like the light bulb moment for me. And then I thought, I know this is crazy, but what if I started making plant jewelry? Like, would people actually wear that? And it turns out they do. So I'm just as surprised and thrilled that people like it, because I knew I liked it, but it turns out that there's actually a market for this. And as far as the other natural elements that I use, I think it's in the same vein that I just love to incorporate things that are more resolute, like metal, and then try to combine it with something that's natural and possibly eroding, or how can I, preserve that? And I just love that like dichotomy between something strong and something seen as fading, and then try to make it work together. And I have a big dog, I have 2 big dogs now, and they require a lot of exercise. And so they get me into the woods twice a day. And so I'm constantly hiking, and it's amazing just the treasures that nature leaves behind. And so I'll find like little bones, or maybe some cicada wings, or I'm really into milkweed pods. We don't have those in California. So when I came to Central Illinois, I was like, what are these cool things? So I knew I had to use them in my work, but I just like finding things that I think look neat. And then I kind of like collect them all and then bring them back to my studio. It was trial and error for me. I have killed many a plant, but now I know how it works, and it's so much more simple. It's basically, I take these components back to my studio, and you can see I've got a lot of all kinds of little trinkets that I've collected, and I set it down and I build around it. And I rarely sketch anything. I just kind of put it together, and in my mind, I've got to make something that's durable and going to be aesthetically pleasing, and it's comfortable to wear. So that's kind of what I'm having in mind as I'm building something. And then when you get to the actual plant part of it, I choose plants that are very hardy. I choose air plants and succulents, and they don't require a lot of maintenance. With succulents, you only have to water them like once every 2 weeks. You got to give them a little bit of light, a little water, and they literally do their own thing. And they will live for years and years and years if you just water them. And what's neat about having them in a small space, they're a lot like goldfish. If you don't give them a lot of room to grow, they stay small. So they'll grow a little bit, they'll evolve, they'll have some roots come out, but they won't go like so crazy that it's overwhelming. But it's all manageable. And whenever somebody purchases something of mine, I like to give them a little instruction pamphlet. They get a little spray bottle. So I try to make it as easy as possible. And ultimately, I want them to just have fun with it and you know, take that little joy that I've made home with them. I think I just feel not a responsibility, but an inspiration to want to encourage people and give them something that is joyful and uplifting and maybe beautiful and maybe funny. And I just think that that's my calling in life, is to just sort of bring joy to people. I hope that's what I bring, but I think that's just what I'm called to do. And for some reason, jewelry ended up being that outlet for me.